Welcome to Rates and Barrels. It's Friday, July 19th. Derek Van Riper, Eno Saris here with you on this episode. We have our 2024 second half rebound draft. We're looking for players who had negative value through the first half of the season, drafting them, hoping to do better in the second half. So it's a head-to-head me versus Eno scenario in this one. We got Project Prospect with a few players coming up, including Jacob Wilson for the A's, Brooks Baldwin for the White Sox, and River Ryan soon to join the Dodgers. Of course, we'll have our weekend waiver wire preview. So a lot to cover in there. Eno, how's it going for you on this Friday?
It's going great. I'm about to leave for Seattle tomorrow, so I won't see you guys next week, but there'll be some much needed rest.
Full house, 4 shows still coming anyway, even with Eno enjoying some time off. If you'd like to join us in the Discord, you can do that using the link in the show description. There's actually stuff in there like free tickets to a Pirates game, thanks to Eno. So you never know what you'll find in the Discord. So be sure to join if you haven't done so already. Let's get things started with this rebound draft. The main point of the exercise is for us to discuss some of the players that have underperformed to this point and explain why we think they're going to be better going forward. As I mentioned up top, the rules are pretty simple. We're looking at the Fangraphs player rater, 12-team, 5x5, looking for players who had negative value and played at least one game in the big leagues prior to the All-Star break. I think we're going to try to make this a 7-round effort. And the rule is going to be you can't have more than 4 hitters or 4 pitchers. So it'll be 3 and 4 in some combination. No specific positional requirements because it doesn't quite work out to do it that way. And if we remember to do this, I'll try to put it on the Google Calendar. I'll tally it up at the end. We'll see, looking at the same auction calculator, when it puts the second half 2024 option up there, we'll see who accrued the most second half value. And since you're going on vacation, and since I made this up and didn't tell you other than just putting it on the rundown, I will let you have the first selection in our first second half rebound draft.
And since I'm just doing this on the fly with very little preparation, I'm going to take the name at the very top of the list. He's just staring at me. I'm going to take Luis Robert Jr.
Seems fair.
I just feel like, some part of it is lower BABIP than usual, 290 BABIP, 330 career. He gets that batting average up to 250, 260, he should be able to. Then the power and speed are there, and he's healthy for now. So I feel like a 260, 12-10 second half will get me what I need in this draft.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure of the players that are in the red that qualify for this draft, Luis Robert by far earned the most last season. So I think that makes him a great general target if you're looking to trade for a player that can make a big impact. Even with the low quality of the supporting cast, he's done this before with similar talent around him. Maybe the White Sox bring up more prospects. I mentioned Brooks Baldwin up top. Maybe we see Colson Montgomery at some point in the second half. Maybe they make a couple of trades. They end up getting a position player back that actually bolsters that group should they trade some pitching. There's a few different ways the lineup could actually be a little better. A healthy Eloy, I know people are laughing as I say that. Maybe that helps boost things compared to where they were in the first half as well. So I think Luis Robert makes a lot of sense as the first pick for this. I'm going to take a pitcher first. I'm going to take Gerrit Cole. We talked about him recently. Seems like the stuff is slowly coming back. Our main concern really is the lack of slider usage, right? But similar to Luis Robert, the thinking here is maybe I could sneak a $20 or $25 half out of Gerrit Cole. Everything is clicking for him now that he gets a few starts under his belt, and he looks something like 80% of typical Gerrit Cole. It will pay off nicely. We talked about him as a trade target before, and he might be somewhat gettable, if only because he was likely held. The people that had him had to figure out how to keep the pitching together without him, and perhaps they did a good enough job to where Cole himself is still expendable in leagues that allow trading. So I'm hoping we get that $20 second half from Gerrit Cole. And I'm one of the people that tried to stash him in a league where I actually need him. So I'm living this one. I'm riding this one out in a place where it actually matters too.
Nice. I had a tough decision between a favorite outfielder of mine A couple of them that I like here, but I'm gonna go with some name value here. Xander Bogaerts as my second hitter. I know he's coming off a shoulder injury, but for the year, his max EV, his barrel rate, his contact rates, they all line up pretty well. He did steal 4 bases in 200 plate appearances, so I think there's going to be power and steals. It may only end up being 280 with, I don't know, 5 or 6 homers and 4 or 5 steals, but it's one of those things where I think the lineup around him has gotten better with him while he's gone. Now, and if he is going to get hits, then that's what he's done since he's gotten back, which I know is like tiny sample, poor analysis, but he is a guy who's gotten hits in the past. So I'm seeing like good runs and RBI out of him on that Padres team. So
after a season, a full draft season of Xander slander, I love that he ends up on your roster for our second half rebound draft. But we like that he went to Driveline. He put in that extra work. He's trying to find ways to continue producing at a high level. And I liked him a lot as an early-ish round oatmeal pick back during draft season. So I think he ends up being a nice, impactful piece for the Padres in the second half of the season. Nothing against that pick whatsoever. I'm going to take Dansby Swanson as my first hitter. I think when I look at Dansby Swanson, I look across the board, the slash line's disgusting. It's like as bad as it's ever been for him in the big leagues. The K rate's up a little bit compared to last season, but he's not chasing more than he was a year ago. The barrel rate is still very good, 9.3%. I think he's been 4 consecutive seasons in the double-digit range, that 10 to 11% marker. Mostly the difference is hitting the ball on the ground. I think he's a key player for the Cubs, of course, being a part of an offense that needs to take a step forward, whether they add at the trade deadline or not. Dansby Swanson's still going to be there. If they're going to make a run, he has to be a part of it. A little bit of kind of does everything in a typically good year, even if he's a slight drag on the batting average. But going into this season, I felt like Dansby Swanson versus Willy Adames was sort of a coin flip where they were going in drafts. I usually took Adames because he was going later. But now you're sort of getting that discount on Dansby Swanson because the first half of the season has been underwhelming. Just 9 homers, 5 steals so far. I think if he could just keep playing every day, the second half ends up being just as good as the first half, even though there's a smaller number of games on the slate.
This one's going to be interesting. I'm going to risk leaving that bat out there. I'm going to go with Blake Snell. My rankings are coming out early next week. Sorry, I had said that they might come out Friday, but it's just, the snazzy kind of fun bits with my rankings this year, as you've noticed, the way that they're formatted and all that, just requires more people to get them out, if you know what I mean, just sort of in terms of structure and what's going on behind the scenes. So, and it's also vacation season. So we just, a couple of vacations didn't line up. And so you should get them next week. Anyway, just a sneak peek into where Snell is. I have been struggling with him. It's been up and down a little bit. But one thing I noticed is that he's one of the few people with a positive stuff trend. Like his stuff is up. He has a 3.5 ERA projection if you use his stuff. He has a 29% strikeout rate projection if you use Stuff Plus. And I think a big part of the story has just been getting comfortable with his catcher, getting comfortable with his environments. The tone has changed a little bit. There was a little bit at one point when he was saying, "Oh, the Giants are just trying to get me back. It's blah blah. This is this. It's getting me back. Get me back." I don't know. Most recently, I don't know if he's trying to rehab those quotes or whatever, but he has been much more positive about the organization and how he feels in it. So maybe they backed off of the rehab. Maybe they clarified some things with each other. Either way, I think he's primed for he's a great pitcher in a great park, or at least a very above average pitcher in a great park.
Yeah, and capable of, I think, just going red hot for a stretch. We've seen that. We've seen it over full seasons before as a 2-time Cy Young winner. So I think if he's finally healthy, the shape of his season has been so unusual. The late signing, couple of injuries. I could see Blake Snell settling in, pitching really well, and ending up being a big part of a Giants team that hangs around and at least causes some problems for other teams in the playoff race over the course of the second half. I'm kind of torn here looking at some of the pitchers that are available. We talked about Kevin Gausman on an episode recently, and it doesn't look like a lot has changed. But at the same time, if you say, okay, he's more of an SP2, SP3 now, that's still pretty good in the pool of players that we're looking at. I think you're generally going to get high volume of innings. You're going to get above average ratios because he throws so many innings. You're going to get a good number of Ks, and that stuff all tends to pop in a player rater. So I'm going to somewhat reluctantly take Kevin Gausman. I don't think he brings the Blake Snell ceiling, but I think he also brings a lot more floor, and I think it feels kind of right after kind of getting Gerrit Cole for ceiling to go ahead and find another guy that could finish as a $20 pitcher in the second half, but sort of does it a slightly different way.
Yeah. I don't really want to take a currently injured guy, but there's one that's looking at me, staring at me.
That's the tricky part of this too, is timing the injuries, because missed time in a partial season has a massive negative impact on value.
Yeah, I'm going to pass on that, I guess. And
we've talked about this before, like injury optimism as the season goes on starts to fade. Whereas like in March and April, you might hold a player for 4 to 6 weeks because the bulk of the season is still there once they come back. Now we're at the point, having passed the All-Star break, where if you say someone's down 4 to 6 weeks, they become much more cuttable, or in a situation like this, they almost become someone you would avoid.
Yeah. This is a gut play here. This is a gut play. Josh Lowe. I'm going to take Josh Lowe. There's not really a reason I can give you other than I think he's, kind of an everyday guy on a team that doesn't always do that. I think there's more power in there, and he's stealing bases and hitting for power. So I'm making my multi-category play against you, where I'm hoping to beat you. And did we establish how the scoring goes?
It's just dollars, so it doesn't matter if you have balance between the categories.
Oh, boo! I was gonna beat you in the categories. No, but it just generally it's good. It's a good way to earn money is to have somebody who does everything. I mean, one thing that really surprised me, I guess this is my argument. Matt Chapman is my argument, and this is why. I did a story today about All-Stars that weren't All-Stars in the first half, and Matt Chapman's name came up. And he doesn't qualify for this. You know why? Because he's been the 7th best third baseman in baseball, in fantasy baseball. Doesn't that surprise you?
Mm-hmm.
He's hit 230, but he's stolen 7 bases, and he's hit a bunch of he's hit like 9 homers or whatever it is, 10, 11, 12, whatever it is. But because he's done everything in all the categories, the batting average will fool you. And so in this case, Josh Lowe has only hit 5 homers, but he hasn't played a full season. And the barrel rate looks great. The max EV doesn't, but it's not a full season yet. I'm into Josh Lowe. I like him as a player. We'll see what the true talent strikeout rate is. My pick depends a little bit on if he strikes out 28% or 33% going forward.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, we wondered about that with Lowe. Like, where does that number settle in? But I think as the Rays potentially thin out the position player group a little bit, Lowe is someone they're going to probably rely on a lot regardless. But the chances of him being a max volume player start to go up if they move a position player or two and get a little bit younger after the trade deadline. So I think that's a pretty good call. Not much has changed for him. He's been gone a lot because of injury so far this season. I'm starting to look at some of the injured guys. Still doesn't feel quite right. I'll take a guy who's a little bit dinged up and probably be disappointed in myself later. But I liked Bichette a lot during draft season, even if we were going to say his 2025 ADP or a second half ADP would be in the 150 range. He's at least healthy, which is something we can't fully say about a lot of the guys we're thinking about right now. I don't know why the barrel rate's basically been cut in half this year. He still hits the ball hard. We know the approach being one that gets where he sprays the ball all over the place is not the ideal approach to consistently get to power. But I look at this and say, okay, maybe it's going to be different than what I expected. Maybe it ends up being a good average in the second half. Projections having the 270, even the low 280 range. Maybe it's that with the equivalent of 15 homer power and 10 to 12 steals, kind of in a weird Matt Chapman sort of way where it's average and then a little bit of everything else. I think Bo Bichette might be sneaky useful in a format like this. Maybe he can give me something similar to what you're expecting from Bogaerts, the kind of healthy thing I was talking about. It's that calf injury he was dealing with before the break. If that's actually behind him, then I think I'll come out okay with Bo Bichette for these final 2.5 months.
All right, it's getting thinner.
It's definitely getting
thinner. I'm still leaving my injured guy out there. It is time for Lars Nootbaar. Come on down. He should spell it with extra O's and extra A's, even on top of the ones he's got.
And he's got 2 of both already in the last name. So
yeah, I'm going with him because the strikeout rate is good. The walk rate is good. The barrel rate is good. The max EV is good. He steals bases. It's all there for him. I do think he's struggling to find a way to pull the ball in the air with authority and not put everything on the ground. But he's a bit of a tinkerer that's aware of this, that I think will maybe make that one adjustment to get past this.
All right. I like that. All right. So Lars Nootbaar, got another guy that's missed a ton of time that just could stay healthy and maybe be the player you thought he was going to be back during draft season. Definitely makes a lot of sense. I'm going to take advantage of the format here. I'm going to take one more pitcher. Maybe I'll end up taking 2. But I'm going to take Hunter Brown. It's funny because if you run the player rater for a 15-team league, he's a slight positive. If you run it for a 12-team league, he's a slight negative, which makes him eligible for our purposes. But this is basically just buying into the adjustments that the sinker has become a really important pitch for him, just having that as a way to keep hitters more honest against the rest of his arsenal. So I think you're going to get lots of Ks, probably better ratios than we've seen for the season so far, something more in line with what he's done for the last 6 or so weeks. Hunter Brown just makes sense to me as someone that is healthier than the some of the other players I've taken so far too. And I think as we kind of go through these last couple of picks, that's where a lot of the gambles are going to be. It's going to be on guys getting back sooner than expected or coming back and just being themselves for the final 6 or 7 weeks that they're available.
Yes, and 2 spots ahead of him in my rankings is Mackenzie Gore, who is actually projected for a little bit worse ERA, but more strikeouts. I was looking to the strength of schedule to make a decision here. I hate to talk about a pitcher that's still on the board. This is a faux pas in most drafts, but Yusei Kikuchi is a guy that I like, and I have him ranked. Where do I have him ranked? Where is Mr. Kikuchi? I gotta search for him, I guess. Wow, I have him ranked way higher. Okay, can I change it? I'm taking Yusei Kikuchi.
All right. You want Yusei Kikuchi instead of Gore? That's fine.
I mean, he's projected for an ERA that's 20 points better than Mackenzie Gore's. The stuff is there. And I was going to say something about strength of schedule. The Blue Jays have a poor strength of schedule. They have a bad one. They have a 506 regular strength of schedule on Fangraphs. That's a 506 winning percentage, I guess they're facing. And the Nationals is 502. But I don't think Kikuchi will be a Blue Jay. And so I'm going to take a bet that he ends up somewhere better than the American League East, because I just don't think the Blue Jays will trade him within their division. And almost every other division makes for easier competitors than the American League East. So Yusei Kikuchi, come on down.
Yeah, solid pick for sure. I think we've talked about him as a good trade candidate for a few episodes now. It's probably going to happen unless the Jays nudge their way back into the buyers group, and it makes all the sense in the world. But he may be the best starting pitcher moved at the deadline this year. All right, so you got 2 pitchers now with 6 players taken. So your last pick will end up being another pitcher to see you have 4 and 3.
I didn't know somebody I like, so
I know I could snipe you here, and I don't think that's the direction I want to go. So it looks like you're going to kind of get what you wanted here. I'm torn on the closers. Like a closer for a partial season could reel
I
off.
know there's some really good
value.
closers here. I was looking at all these closers here. I was looking at all these closers. I mean, how do you even pick? Let me just list them. So before you pick, we've got Clay Holmes as a minus in 12 teamers. Camilo Doval, Edwin Díaz. I mean, if I were to rank closers for the rest of the season, I think I'd rank all of them in the top 5.
Yeah, I think I still like Díaz the most of the bunches, even though this has been just a disaster year for him. We've seen stretches like this before, and we've seen worse than this from him before.
But what makes me nervous is they haven't all been bad, and yet they've all had negative value the way that this was calculated. So I'm just never nervous that you could get a fine half season from Doval or Díaz and still not rate that well.
Right. I think the exercise here would be of those teams. Well, especially of the Giants and Mets, which one's more likely to stay in the mix and be a buyer because you want to max out those saves. That's going to be the thing that drives the value in the player rater. And then with the Yankees, does Clay Holmes make it through the trade deadline, keeping the job, or they upgrade that spot and make him a setup guy? Like that's the kind of lingering question as you look at those guys. But I'm going to pass on all of them for now and see if it moves you off of your Mackenzie Gore pick. Now we're just playing mind games. I want to take Royce Lewis, but I don't know when he's coming back, so I'm not.
The guy I've been referencing is Tristan Casas too.
Yeah, I keep looking at.
I feel like he must be close. With Royce, you just like I don't know. I don't know where he is.
That's a complete unknown.
Casas is like they said maybe back by the end of the month. So
right, Casas and Michael Harris are both on similar timetables. Harris will be probably early August if he gets back. By ADP, he was the best player eligible for this draft. I just, as much as I like him long term, I don't think I want to squeeze him onto the roster here and put too much of an expectation on him for the second half of the season. So yes, I'm stalling a little bit. I'm going to do something really unconventional. I'm going to take Sean Murphy. I'm going to take a catcher.
Wow.
A guy who's healthy that I really liked. I think, catchers can pop a little bit in the player raters and in those formulas because of the scarcity. But even without that, I was looking at last year what he did. He was about a $12 player, and that was with a bad second half. And I think this is a bet on Murphy being more the player he was in the first half of 2023 than the player he was in the second half of that season. Because he's been hurt for most of this year, we don't really know which of those is true. But last year, the first season with Atlanta, Sean Murphy had a career high 15.8% barrel rate. Kept the K rate down like he usually does. It's a great lineup, even without Acuna as far as run production goes. It's kind of a bet on more of the good things we've seen from Austin Riley lately, a possible bounce back from Matt Olson. It's kind of all of those things rolled into one, but also some belief that Sean Murphy is more of like a $15 player over a full season. So just hoping to get that over a half now that he's finally healthy again.
I'm going to switch doors. Monty Hall. Yes, I know. I got it wrong earlier. I'm switching doors to Camilo Doval. The thinking here is that even if the Giants sell, they're not going to sell Doval, I'm pretty sure. So they could sell some relievers around him that make the relief core so good. But I kind of bet that with the flames that are under the GM's butt, perhaps, that they buy or just sort of tepidly buy. I can't imagine spending all that money and knowing that your time as the leader of this team is limited and not going for it on some level. So the other part of this is, yes, Camilo Doval's location plus isn't good, and yes, he's had some bad walk rates in the past, but there's been very few stops where his walk rate has been as bad as it is right now. And I could see that as just an easy thing for him to iron out going forward. The stuff is dominant. The things that we've found about save opportunities have been that team quality matters and team bullpen quality matters. And I think that's a sneaky, really good bullpen. The reason team bullpen quality matters is because they have to hand you the save opportunity. They have to keep the lead, and I trust Ryan Walker. I trust Tyler Rogers. I trust that bullpen.
Completely fair. Yeah, I think you're right about Farhan having that extra nudge to try and make this roster better rather than try to play for the future, given the state of things in San Francisco right now. I am going to go ahead and take a closer. I'm going to take Edwin Díaz. I was hoping he'd make it there. I felt like the difference between the closers was so small that there was no reason to take one with that 6th pick, but I think the Mets hang around. I think they're just good enough. I think they can be a team that spends more on payroll the rest of the way, that makes player acquisition at the deadline affordable in terms of not giving up long-term value. And I think that ultimately drives some value for guys like Díaz. And they're going to create tons of save chances in the second half. And I think we'll see something more typical from him. He's still missing a lot of bats, 33.6% K rate. Yeah, it's not the 50% we got a year ago, but it's still very good, right? Among closers, that's still going to be top end. That would still probably nudge him closer to that top 5 if we were re-ranking the position for the rest of the season.
They are really set up for maybe a rental starter acquisition because the bullpen's fine. Buto has been pretty good out of the bullpen, and Dediel Nunez is actually a kind of a stuff plus hero. So you're kind of putting together the pieces in the bullpen. The lineup, I think, looks strong and long. I mean, who's the big hole in this lineup? At this point, it's Jeff McNeil, and at least he's going to put the ball in play for you. Even Harrison Bader has been playing above average. So the lineup looks long. It looks good. I think, maybe Senga can come back and be a playoff starter for you. He's at least a top 5 guy. They've got, Minaya and Severino look like top 5 guys. Peterson could be. I think I'd want to be upgrading on the Quintana spot. And I think you could do that in trade in a trade environment, or you kind of push Quintana and Peterson into sort of 6th, 7th areas, or 5th, 6th, 7th. So I think acquiring a rental starter, even like a Jack Flaherty, I think would make sense for them.
Yeah, and I don't think it's going to hurt them long term if they go after some players like that either. So I wouldn't be surprised at all. The Mets are 4th in Team WRC plus this season.
Yeah,
who had that on the prediction?
Vientos has been a revelation for them, and Alvarez is good. And so both those guys hit the ball super hard. And then Nimmo is just an underrated player. I think people just don't understand. I think Nimmo and Lindor are maybe some of the most underrated players in baseball.
It's weird, but it's true as far as how people look at those two guys in particular. So recapping our draft, you got Luis Robert, Xander Bogaerts, Blake Snell, Josh Lowe, Lars Nootbaar, Yusei Kikuchi, and Camilo Doval with your 7 picks. I took Gerrit Cole, Dansby Swanson, Kevin Gausman, Bo Bichette, Hunter Brown, Sean Murphy, and Edwin Díaz.
The Bo Bichette one bothers me a little bit. I don't think I saw his name. It's a good one.
Using the same spreadsheet.
I know. I didn't see his name on there.
That's fair.
But of course it's on there. I mean, he's been bad. And I'm not sure that it's like, rock solid, but I think it's a good pick.
Well, we'll see how it plays out. Should be fun. Let's move on to Project Prospect. We've got a new shortstop coming up for the A's, Jacob Wilson. And Jacob Wilson is a bit of a polarizing player because he's got questionable power, but seems to have a phenomenal hit tool. And how good are we're talking about a 3.3% strikeout rate during his brief time at AAA, 10.8% during his time at AA. And that sample is only 41 games combined between this year or between just this season. He played a little bit at high A last year to being drafted. So the simple question is, what are the reasonable comps for Jacob Wilson as a hitter, as a tons of contact, questionable power sort of bat?
I hate this, oh, nice, exciting player. And now here comes Eno to poo-poo it. He doesn't hit the ball hard. So if you look at his max EV and you look at his hard hit rates, I found comps in the major leagues, sort of +or -2, +or -3 in terms of max EV and hard hit. So just around him. And the comps are up on the TV screen right now. It's Jose Altuve, who's an outlier. I don't know that you want to comp to Altuve in terms of batted balls, stuff. He's done a lot of things that made himself unique over the years. Bryce Turang, I think, is actually the best comp for Jacob Wilson, which is, I know some people are going to get very angry about that comp, but I think it is a really good comp because they're, defensive guys, make a lot of contact, don't hit the ball super hard. Justin Turner's on here. He's not a good comp because he's old. Cedric Mullins, probably ditto. Jeff McNeil is like a low end comp. It's like probably like a what could happen in a bad way comp. And Max Schumann is that would be a terrible outcome for Jacob Wilson. But these are and Max Schumann is above league average this year, so I'm really, I know I'm rude, but I'm not trying to be rude. But Max Schumann also strikes out more. So if you bring contact rate batting, I think Turang is the best comp for him.
All right. So then to be like Turang as a fantasy player, you have to run. I mean, so far this season, Bryce Turang's been a $16 player by the player rater, 12 team 5x5.
What happens if you take the dollars for stolen base out?
Oh, I'm sure it's bad. It's not terrible because he plays every day. He leads off a lot against righties. Like the average has been good. I just think a lot of pressure is put on that particular category with this profile. And the other way to get there, of course, is to be like a 300 plus hitter, which is hard to project for anybody because it's very hard to hit in the big leagues right now, too.
Yeah, so. I mean, it doesn't line up super well because Stephen Kwan hits the ball even softer than Jacob Wilson. But Stephen Kwan is in the range of outcomes for Jacob Wilson as well. Although Stephen Kwan has stolen 20 bases in both his professional seasons, and I don't know what Jacob Wilson will do in that category.
Yeah, so far as a pro, and again, this is scattered over a bunch of different levels, including the complex. Jacob Wilson is 6'8" as a base stealer in what is about a half season's worth of games all tallied up.
It's like a meteoric rise.
Yeah, and he's on base all the time, so there are chances because he creates them. Fangraphs is a 55 grade on his speed, so from that standpoint, it seems like he could do it. It's really a lot of an unknown. So as you kind of think about redraft leagues, 15 teams, is that the cutoff right now for Wilson until we get more? I mean, who
no, I mean, it's so intriguing.
Fantasy?
I think you can pick him up anywhere. I wouldn't pick him up in like 10 and 12 team leagues where you have to play him or you play your bench a lot. But if you have that one spot on your bench where you're nursing along, where's that line? Who's somebody like
Jeremy Pena? Like it's always the Jeremy Pena line. Are you taking Jacob Wilson?
Yeah, I'm taking
unseen over Pena.
Yeah, just because I could
in the shallow leagues. Okay.
Yeah, just try something new. Yeah.
All right, that's probably a pretty good spot to just say, oh, all right, let's. I mean, Neto, like Neto versus Wilson. Are you holding Neto?
I like him. Let me see what he's been doing. Yeah, I mean, he's better than Pena because he, double-digit homers and stolen bases. Like, there's some decent upside there still. It's almost like just reaching for the newest version. There is somebody here later that I'm reaching for the newest version right after. It's that meme where he's looking at the other girl walking the other way,
holding hands, looking back. Yep,
I'm keeping Neto though.
Keeping Neto. Oh, this would be a harsh cut, but maybe something you would do at this point in the year. Nico Hoerner versus Jacob Wilson.
Oh, that's another comp for me, for Jacob Wilson.
So that's a Spider-Man meme.
It is, and I think with the slightly lower rate of stealing bases, or I mean, actually pretty significantly lower rate of stealing bases for Hoerner, I could go for it.
Okay.
I mean, they're very similar. So what's the worst case scenario? You just get another Nico Hoerner. That's sort of how I see it. Maybe you lose a few stolen bases.
I think the worst case scenario would be Wilson moves so fast to the minors that he's overmatched in the big leagues and they send him back down.
And he's unusable.
And he becomes unusable. But if the goal is shooting for some ceiling and you just think Nico Hoerner showing us that he's more of a floor guy anyway, then yeah, you take the new guy and see if you
remember
more.
Jeremy Pena is probably out there for you if you messed up. You can go back to Pena at the end.
Yeah. So, all right, that gives us an idea of some guys you'd be thinking about dropping to upgrade to Jacob Wilson in those more shallow formats. Let's move on to another call-up, Brooks Baldwin. Baldwin kind of looks like an underrated player, right? I haven't really heard a lot about him. He's in the White Sox system, and I was reading some of the profiles, and I thought it was interesting when I found the White Sox 2024 report over at Fangraphs. Eric Longenhagen and Tess Druskin had him in the bat to ball sleepers category. So he wasn't even in like the actual ranked group, but they listed him as a versatile switch hitter with a sweet swing, right? And I was like, okay, that's kind of good. That's kind of what we're looking for. And someone that can play all over if he's not actually a shortstop, or if they do bring up Colson Montgomery at some point, Baldwin can play one of the other vacant spots and stick around and maybe actually do something. We're talking about a guy who's been at least 20% better than league average at each stop since the start of last season. There's a little bit of power. There's pretty good efficiency as far as what he's done as a base stealer so far as well. It's more of a question of how quickly does Brooks Baldwin adjust, making that big leap that everyone has to make facing big league pitching now.
I do like this, and this is important for Wilson as well, that I do like the contact guys. I feel like there's a base level when they get up that at least they won't strike out 40% of the time and just go back down. You know what I mean? It is interesting that they love his bat to ball skills, because there are some higher swing strike rates in the lower minors for Baldwin, but he looks, this is like, that's a little bit more scout versus in stats, and then he comes to AAA and it's just 35 plate appearances. He doesn't strike out at all, but I don't think that's useful for this enterprise. So I think he's likely to strike out around 20% of the time, league average 21, 22. I have no idea what you give you power and steal wise. So this is a deep league play for me, for sure.
All right. So you're thinking more AL only league, maybe 15 team league if you're really kind of just looking for something to hit in the middle infield.
Like if you're talking to NFC, like put him on your tree, but not at the top.
All right. Similar to maybe like Angel Martinez, who came up for the Guardians recently. That's sort of the expectation.
But Angel would probably be ahead if I was thinking about picking up players.
Okay. That gives us a sense of where Baldwin sort of fits.
But one thing that's cool about Baldwin is, you mentioned this, but he's played everywhere. Yeah. In 2024, we've got 11 games in 15 games in the minors at second. So that's probably his primary position. But he also had 6 games at third, 57 games at short. I guess maybe that's his primary position. But he also played in the outfield 10 games and even DH'd once. So, I hesitate to give him shortstop, but I think he might play all over.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's a question of what they want to do. If they think there's a chance that he's their long-term shortstop, they'll play him there, see how it looks, and then decide later, because they can move Montgomery. Paul DeYoung's not part of the long-term plan. They can move him to third. They added Nick Senzel, by the way, after the Nats let him go. So Senzel's going to play some second base. So the Nick Senzel tour of the big leagues continues. But
why?
I don't know.
Why? Why? He's 29 years old. He hasn't ever been above league average with the bat. He hasn't ever been an asset defensively.
To be fair, the Reds played him out of his natural position most of the time he was there.
What's his natural position?
It's supposed to be third. They're going to play him in second.
He played third.
He played third for the Nats a lot.
Yeah. Oh, you're saying the Reds playing him out?
Yeah, the Reds making him an outfielder was.
I don't know. This is a little bit more eye test, but the defensive stats somewhat agree with me. Like, I thought he was a terrible third baseman.
Yeah, no, it's he just can't hit. He's got a 78 WRC plus and 1,600 career plate appearances, and I realize some of those have been coming off of injuries. He's dealt with vertigo. It hasn't been an easy path for Nick Senzel, but like, what are we clinging to at this point?
I have no idea. It's not even like, oh, he projects well. He projects to be worse than league average.
The BAT-X does spit out a 93 WRC plus, so maybe that's a slight upgrade. But yeah, it kind of feels like they're stuck on some old prospect reports at this point, trying to get Nick Senzel a chance.
It's just gonna make me angry.
Let's try to make you happy. Let's talk about River Ryan for a second.
That does make me happy.
Yeah. See, as we suggested, there's a path for him. And Fabio Nardaya just reported a couple days ago they're going to bring River Ryan up It's not going to be for this first series, at least based on how the probable starters are listed. It sounds like they're going to go Gavin Stone, Justin Robleski, and James Paxton for their first 3 out of the break. But
Paxton
that second
is hanging
series
on for dear life
by a thread. So you've got Kershaw making progress, and now River Ryan entering the mix. And I think Ryan kind of fits into this other question we'll get to in a minute, like of the pitchers that haven't debuted yet, that are prospects that should come up this year.
Number one.
He's number one for you. And this would be a group that includes Jackson Jobe, Kate Horton, Mizorowski.
Like career-wise, Jobe might be ahead of him because Jobe is also really nasty. But I don't know exactly what reason the Tigers would necessarily have to push Jobe's timeline, you know?
Yeah, I think for Jobe, it's more the Tigers get hot for a few weeks and then he becomes an upgrade that they need to try and chase down a wild card.
Or he comes up to replace Flaherty, but
I guess that could be a solution too, because you want him to problem solve big league hitters a bit, because you have designs on being good next year.
But do you want to keep him in case he gets Rookie of the Year? So you want to keep him under 50 innings, which actually is doable.
It's doable. Plus, he missed some time this year with an injury, so
you could just shut him down early.
He's got room. I think Jackson Jobe could probably just pitch every 5th day for the rest of the season without really being.
Would he get over 50 innings?
If he came up today, yeah, he would. But if
he comes up August 1st, or if he comes up after they trade Jack Flaherty, you'll be talking about sort of like 9-ish starts. So you could, and you can just shut him down early,
right?
Because you just be like, you made your innings, so you could just get 40 innings out of him. So what is 40 innings worth versus, it's a little bit like who's up now is my deal, and I think River Ryan is closer to being up now,
Well, yeah.
They're talking about it. They're talking about him bringing him up. That's the decider for me. The other part of this is I have seen Stuff Plus numbers on Jobe, and they're really exciting, and scouts all love him. And he looks there's a whiff of DeGrom about him. So that's how exciting you should be about Jackson Jobe. But River Ryan, it looks almost like a model breaker. I've got AAA Stuff Plus numbers for him. The pitches he throws the most are the 4-seam fastball, 122 Stuff Plus. So this is a nasty fastball. 117 on a cutter, 132 on a slider. So even if that's a sweeper, he's got the cutter. So he'll be fine. Sometimes I mention that because I don't always trust sweeper Stuff Pluses all the way. I feel like the league is getting better at sweepers, and so Stuff Plus, every time we update it, sweepers will get knocked down a little bit. But it doesn't stop there. Sinker 104. That's really high for a sinker. Curve 138 Stuff Plus. Change up 117. Yeah. It's a big mix. I think he'll come up and be like 4-seam cutter slider, but the fact that the sinker, curve, and change all rate well gives him like that ability to be like, oh, I need to do more. You know what I mean? Like there's other tricks he has in his bag. It looks really good. And this is supposed to be scaled to the major leagues. So this isn't like he's just got stuff that would dominate the minors. That's the whole point of Stuff. This is supposed to be scaled to the big leagues, and he looks nasty.
If they get Buehler back along with Kershaw, and we'll assume Yamamoto's still on the shelf, who are their best 5 starters? And they often go 6. They may go 6 to keep everybody fresh. They quietly do it.
They do.
Talked about that before. So Glasnow, Kershaw, Buehler, Stone, Ryan, and Knack. And then you bump Paxton and Robleski. And then once Yamamoto comes back, then Ryan or Knack get bumped out if everyone stays healthy.
Yeah. If you're in redrafts, just treat this like who's up now, who's pitching now. I don't actually, because of this scenario that you just put out, where it's like, where does Ryan fit when everyone's healthy? And because of the kind of what we went through with Jobe is like, what are they thinking about timeline? How many innings do they want him to pitch? I don't know that stashing pitchers is a great idea in redraft leagues, because you could just wait forever and they could be like, and he's shut down. You're like, God dang it.
Yeah, it's hard to get way out in front of these. I mean, I think I ran the poll in the prospects channel on the Discord, and overwhelmingly Jackson Jobe is the the preferred stash of the group. River Ryan was not in the poll. I think it's because I look at Ryan as someone who's already getting that bump. So it's kind of like, who's next?
Yeah. I had a couple other names I would wanted to list to that, add to that list is just maybe Braxton Ashcraft and Bubba Chandler. Bubba Chandler probably a little step ahead. Those are both Pirates guys. I think in what's going to happen in Pittsburgh is if they buy or make a trade, it'll be for somebody like a bat that has multiple years of control, like Taylor Ward. Then on the pitching side, they will just DFA some guys. So they'll just be like, thank you, Marco Gonzalez or Martin Perez, or maybe even trade them away.
Send them to the Angels to chew, just to fill a seat, just to chew.
Yeah, or maybe some other contender just wants a spot starter. Even it's just like, we need a guy for 2 weeks. Can we have Marco? And they're like, yeah, give them sort of cash considerations or whatever it is. So I think that could be a place that Pittsburgh would be like, we'll just upgrade from within when it comes to it, because it wouldn't make sense for them to trade for a rental starter or something. That doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, I think my quick argument against Cade Horton right now is that he's still coming back from a lat injury. So if he comes back from that and starts pitching well, then maybe you stash him, try to get a week or two ahead of the call up before it costs you a lot. But I think if I were choosing from the group in the poll, I like Mizorowski quite a bit, because when we talked about the Brewers a bit in passing on the show with Trevor on Thursday, yeah, like they have to do something in that rotation. They're probably not going to go out and make another trade. They already added Aaron Civale. DL Hall's coming back as a starter, but Mizorowski has done a great job cutting down on his walks. You go back to his first start in June. It's a span of 7 outings now. Jacob Mizorowski has only walked 10 hitters during that span, and he's doing it with the electric bat missing stuff that we're accustomed to. It's a 44-10 strikeout to walk ratio in 33 1/3 innings. I don't know if they have to necessarily let him see Nashville. Like, couldn't they just jump him up from Double-A if they think he's got big league ready stuff?
I think you wouldn't want him to see ABS.
Yeah, given some of the issues he's had with control,
you want to get him in front of a really good framer. Yeah. One thing that David Force said recently about calling up Lawrence Butler again, that was interesting, was just, we do a fair amount of our player development at the big league level. I don't know if that's a good sign to hear that. I think he's coming from the A's, who we know don't maybe invest as much as they should in minor league coaches. And, to some extent, they're like, oh, well, our best coaches are in the major leagues. Let's get them up there. But I wonder, even if you do invest in the minor leagues, it's probably still true that your best coach is in the major leagues.
Yeah.
So maybe Mizorowski is like, this is how far he's going to get. Let's get him in front of our major league pitching coach, and our best framer in our organization is probably going to be the starting catcher in the big leagues.
Well, I think the other reason I believe this is they were pretty quick to just move Abner Uribe out of AAA, and that was a little different because he's a reliever.
But he's wild too.
And he's a little wild. But yeah, I mean, I would not be surprised if Mizorowski ends up being the next Brewers prospect to get a look and ends up having a really important role for them.
He's kind of at where he was innings wise last year. He had about 70 innings last year. He's at 72 now. But we're seeing some pitchers kind of blast through any sort of numbers we had in mind for them.
Yeah. And I think there could be a world too where they're a little bit careful with some of the usage. And once they bring him up, they go to a 6-man rotation. Yeah, I think they could find a way to make that work. And you go back and look at some of his previous totals. I mean, at college, he was another guy from Crowder College. I think Aaron Ashby was the other guy they got from that program. 76 innings his final year in college, with another 1 2/3 in Carolina that year. So triple digits will be kind of uncharted territory for Mizorowski once he gets there. It's probably 125, 130 is the number they're looking for. They can get a lot
more one of those things where you like pounce. I think pounce if they tell you who they're calling him up and who he's facing.
and then just wait otherwise in most redraft situations. NL only, probably different. You can afford to stash a guy like this and get nothing if it doesn't end up happening. But I think it's going to happen. He seems kind of important to them. You mentioned not necessarily wanting to stash pitchers. Junior Caminero time has to be just around the corner, right? He's 43% rostered in the RotoWire Online Championship. So if not now, like, it's going to cost you a fortune if you go to pick him up. And I just saw a note on RotoWire this morning that he's back from the minor league IL. So give Caminero these next 10, 14 days maybe to get his legs back under him coming off that quad injury. Think about the Rays maybe trading a position player at the deadline, and I think there's a very good chance we'll see Caminero for these final 2 months.
If the Rays aren't going to pick up Brandon Lowe's options, and the acquiring team is not either, these $10 million, $11 million options, Brandon Lowe could be a small trade that someone makes. You know, let me just help you from the left side on the infield. Hey, that's pretty good. You know, here's a guy who can hit for some power. Maybe we'll give him a shot. And like, maybe he works with our coaching staff and we do consider picking up the $10 million option, you know? Like, would you rather Brandon Lowe or Gavin Lux, you know, in a big at bat in September, you know, in October?
Yeah. Lowe. I don't think the guy that is more likely to do some damage.
Right. Yeah.
A healthy margin.
Want some homers here. Gavin's not really given much of anything. So if Brandon Lowe's on the move, nobody would bat an eye if Brandon Lowe was traded at this point. We've made the case that Randy Arozarena would be a little bit more surprising one because they've got him for 2 more years after this, but also given the Rays, it wouldn't even be that surprising. Mm-hmm. And then I thought Yandy Díaz would be a really interesting acquisition for somebody. So those are 3 guys. I'm not saying all 3. And then Ahmed Rosario is super cheap. Like, what if you're dealing with a super cheap team that doesn't have any money but wants to upgrade somewhere? You know, there's got to be a contender that fits that bill. It was a super cheap, like the Guardians or something. Get Ahmed Rosario back, whatever. You know what I mean? Like,
well, he'd be a good bench player for a lot of teams. Yeah,
and he wouldn't cost any money. His contract is super cheap. So I'm not saying that all 4 of those guys are going to be on the move, but I feel like the odds are one of them will be. And as soon as that one person is gone, there's an opening. I mean, those are fairly regular players for these Rays. And so you just need one of them to be gone for Junior Caminero to have an easy slot to come up into.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, he's clearly a big part of their future, but I think he's going to be a big part of their present. And they might do the thing where they give some players away in trades, look to the future without trying to completely punt. That's where I think the Rays like to live. Like, yeah, maybe this isn't our year, but we're not giving up completely. Caminero helps them do that, gives them some credibility.
If you trade Yandy Díaz internally, you could say, well, we think Caminero can hit as well as Yandy Díaz because they actually have some similarities in terms of bat speed and contact rates and stuff like that. But Caminero has more defensive value and is going to be $10 million cheaper next year. So you kind of pat yourself on the back and say, we just saved $10 million and our current team stayed the same. Totally a Rays move.
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, let's talk about some players we might be looking at on the waiver wire this weekend. There are some not like universally available pitchers that are available in some places, all returning from injuries in the near future. So I'm going to roll through these just as like, hey, these guys could be available even though they're likely rostered. Kodai Senga, the least likely available of the bunch, scheduled for 1 more rehab start this weekend for the Mets before he comes back from that shoulder triceps issue, almost 90% rostered on CBS. So we're really talking about just a handful of leagues where he might be able to get him. But everybody else a little more available, including Devin Williams. He struck out the side on Sunday in a rehab appearance at High A, Wisconsin. It's not clear if he's going to make another rehab appearance at Nashville or anywhere else this weekend, or if they're just going to activate him. But I get the sense Devin Williams gets activated and he's the closer again, and Trevor McGill slides right back into a setup role.
That works. That works for everybody. You know, I think that makes sense.
Yeah. So even if you don't see him this weekend necessarily, I think he's going to be an add now or you're not going to get him sort of player. Clayton Kershaw, we've discussed a lot lately. 3 scoreless last Saturday at AAA. Ended up with 50 pitches because he threw extras in the bullpen. So he's getting closer, probably still another rehab start or 2 away from possibly rejoining that Dodgers rotation mix that we talked about earlier. 77% rostered on CBS, 7% rostered in RotoWire Online Championship because, unless for injured players, unless they were drafted, they're not available to be picked up until they're back in the pool. So very few teams stashed him, given that we didn't even know if Kershaw was going to make it back to pitch this year. So that's kind of interesting that Kershaw will be a fab target in a couple of weeks in those leagues and could be openly available elsewhere. Jeffrey Springs making good progress too. 77 pitches at AAA on Sunday. Not lined up as one of their probables for the weekend. They're going to go Eflin, Bradley, and Boz for those first 3 starts at Yankee Stadium. The Rays are in Toronto to begin next week, so it's possible Springs gets activated for start next week as he's nearing the end of his rehab assignment. And then if you're looking further down the road, Tyler Mahle, he's only 7% rostered on CBS and not rostered at all in the RotoWire Online Championship. He went 2 1/3 in a rehab start. This was the Arizona Complex League. He's moved around to 3 different levels. They're probably just doing that thing where it's like, keep him as close to the facilities, keep him as close to where we want him as possible, but a couple more turns from Mahle, and he probably rejoins that Rangers rotation maybe by the start of August.
You're going to have to help me a little bit on the 12-team bats because I'm only in 1 or 2 12-team. I'm in 3 12-team leagues, but 2 are Ottoneu. So like the waiver wire is very different. It's very deep. It plays very deep. And then the other one is also a dynasty. So half the players that are on the waiver wire are protected in our minor leagues. So it's not useful for me to look at that. But I have lots of 15-team leagues, and I would tell you that Matt Wallner is somebody I'm circling. He's got the second best bat speed in the big leagues, and the playing time is a little bit unsure, but the longer Royce Lewis is out, the more he's going to play. And I could see him kind of swim moving past Trevor Larnach and maybe taking Trevor's job once Royce Lewis is back. So something to bet on there is real power. I know the strikeout rate is bad. He told me a little bit about the adjustments that he made in the minor leagues to kind of regain some of that contact ability this year. And then another name that I'm kind of circling, other than Lawrence Butler and Justin Henry Malloy, are just 2 guys that Lawrence Butler has had good peripherals, and he has a 3-homer game that kind of got him into everyone's queue. But he steals bases. He has good batted ball stats. In some cases, some of the flaws that Malloy has, he shares. Butler, they both kind of strike out too much. But one thing I've noticed with Malloy is that he is mashing against lefties. So if you have a daily lineup situation, you could just make it easy on yourself and just play Malloy against lefties. But the other thing is, in the last month, Malloy has struck out less. He's gone from a 38% strikeout rate to a 27% strikeout rate. Between June and July, and then the barrel rate is coming up for Malloy. So just those 2 guys or 3 guys I wanted to put on your radar if you hadn't been. I think they're mostly 15-team league guys, but of the 3, probably Butler has the chance to jump into 12-team league status.
Yeah, so I was looking at a bunch of outfielders, kind of grouping them to say, okay, here's a handful of guys that are already on a lot of rosters. Here's a handful of guys that are trending onto rosters. And who do you like most out of this group? Give me 3 that you like out of the group. And we'll put Matt Wallner's in this group, Colton Cowser, Andy Pages, Lawrence Butler, who you just mentioned, Reese Hines, who's been taken off lately, Jake Myers, Alex Verdugo, and Jesus Sanchez. Because I feel like that group, it ranges up to maybe 80 to 90% rostered in a typical 12-team league. But those are guys you have to start thinking about dropping if you're going to add the shiny new toys, the Hines, Butler, Wallner types. So does anyone stand out to you as clearly like, yeah, I want that guy or I want those guys out of that group?
Yeah, I was gonna say Verdugo, but he's minus projection in a 12-team league for the battle. But this is a 3 outfielder 12-team league. That's a little bit small.
Yeah, that default though is frustrating.
Verdugo now is let's see where he is. on projections. 74th outfielder, actually just around replacement. That is surprising me. I was gonna pick him as just my safe veteran that I'll keep around. Jake Myers has the same projection. Oh, that is very interesting. In 12-team leagues with 5 outfielders, Jake Myers and Alex Verdugo are below replacement. That opens me up to say whatever I want. I'm gonna take. Who do you got? You had Butler, Wallner. Who else?
Wallner, Cowser, Pajes, Butler, Hines, Myers, Verdugo, and Sanchez.
Let me go off script here a little bit. Jesus Sanchez is projected to have the same kind of -$1 value as those other guys, but as I uncovered in a piece today, he has actually been working very diligently on his biggest flaw, which is his ground ball rate. It has been improving with every week. The rolling ground ball rate is really eye-opening. If he can lift the ball at all, he has a swing that has the same bat speed and swing length as Bobby Wood Jr. I'm not saying he's Bobby Wood Jr. Don't put that in the paper. But what I am saying is that the biggest deal was he used to have a 65% ground ball rate. It's down to 47, and we're seeing some of the power come back with it. I could just see like a really good second half, which would be, like 260 homers, a 260 batting average with 10, 11 homers, with a little bit of speed. So if he's projected by more sober projections to be in this group, I'm going to take him. He's going to have the best batting average of anybody in here not named Verdugo too.
Yeah, I think the two that stand out to me are Sanchez and Myers. And it's been there recently. Sanchez is getting that power, as you mentioned. He's been a top 40 outfielder in the last 30 days. That plays in a ton of leagues. So, like, Myers, kind of nice balanced production, thumbs up. Probably the first for me out of this group. Sanchez, maybe the surprising number 2. Everybody else is where it's like wide open. Colton Cowser and Alex Verdugo have been brutal lately. I think both could be in danger of losing.
Career-wise, I love Cowser still. I think this is part of his, finding adjustments. He's obviously has some swing and miss in his game, so he needs to figure out how pitchers are pitching him. But I still really like him long-term because it's such a great eye, power, speed. The glove is good enough for him to still play in center. So Cowser is a good, I would say, a buy in dynasty leagues. If you can use this bad stretch to buy him, I would buy him.
Yeah, actually, I think I previously suggested the Cowser might not have as much defensive value as Cedric Mullins, and as someone on our Discord pointed out, it's not necessarily the case.
I mean, he's playing
improved defensively. Yeah, he's been playing there a little bit this year. It's more of, I don't know. It's more of, can he cut down that swing and miss? Can he actually get rid of that? Because the production's been light, really going back to May, as we talked about, I think, earlier in this week. So I think that's where it's like, what do you need right now? And maybe you're playing the schedule in a 12-team league with the others. I mean, Rhys Hines is probably the most tempting of the alternatives because the start has just been ridiculous, but there's probably the highest ceiling and the lowest floor if we're trying to estimate that for a player out of this bunch.
Yeah, and totally somebody that maybe you can ride the wave now, but career-wise, I would be much more negative on. Just that kind of strikeout rate. I just get the vibes, the Aristides Aquino vibes. So Lawrence Butler, let me just give a little case for him as having best or second best ceiling on this group. Is just that his strikeout rate has oscillated hardcore around a swinging strike rate that's been much more steady for Lawrence Butler. So what that tells me is just. There's some eye test here too, because I see a fair amount of them. It's just he gets wrapped up, like pitchers just like play with him, and I think the more he sees pitchers doing it, major league pitchers doing that, the more he's going to be like, oh no, I know what you're doing. You're doing this, or you're doing this. I've seen this before. I know what's going on here. So the true talent ability to make contact is not that bad. 12.8% swing strike rate for his career with 11s in the minors. That could produce anywhere from a 24 to 30% strikeout rate. And what I'm saying is, if he figures something out in terms of how people are approaching him, you start getting closer to that 25, 24% strikeout rate that might be attainable for him. now you got a guy with power and speed, hits the ball hard. There's a chance, there's like a 10% chance that he could be like a 25-25 guy with a 250 average.
Yeah. I like Butler, especially in long-term leagues where you're just kind of, hey, what could go right? What could I do here that might actually help me in the second half of the season, but also could help me in 2025? I think he profiles really well there. Maybe Jesus Sanchez still does too, given some of the things you mentioned that he's improving upon here in recent weeks. One more part of the weekend waiver preview. I think this is kind of your window. If you are trying to find future saves coming out of the trade deadline, this would be the weekend to do it. It'll be less expensive now than it will be the next couple of weekends. Ben Joyce, looking good, really, since coming back. Looking at the numbers for him, 15-5 strikeout to walk in 14 1/3 innings. No earned runs allowed since June 14th. Only 10% rostered in CBS leagues, 25% rostered in the RotoWire Online Championship. Big stuff numbers, too, on the fastball and the slider, and that sinker that he added has been solid, too. So you got 3 pitches now, decent command for a reliever with a 97 location plus. Carlos Estevez seems like one of the absolute most likely relievers to be moved. This one, it just jumps off the page. But it's kind of now if you want a discount and later if you want to pay a premium for Ben Joyce.
Yeah. In Auto, I've already added him in both of my leagues. I got him, snuck him in for $1, just looking ahead at the schedule. I like the new sinker splinker situation that Joyce is throwing. And he just seems like the really obvious solution for them once they trade Carlos Estevez, and there's no reason for them to keep him around as a rental. I got a question in a chat today about that, and so I just wanted to list out the names that I put in the chat. Joyce was number 1. Puck was number 2. I don't know that these next 3 have rankings, but John Brebbia, Nate Pearson, and Robert Garcia were some names I wanted to throw on there. Feel like Finnegan's gone. Garcia's got 3 holds, in recent play and the best stuff numbers in that pen. Nate Pearson just looks like a closer, man. He's got the stuff of it. He's the big guy. He throws real hard. I feel like Jimmy Garcia and Jordan Romano and Chad Green could all be traded or hurt. So. That puts Nate Pearson in the mix on some level. And then John Brebbia is not exciting. I like Jordan Leisure's stuff better, but they've been up and down with Jordan Leisure. He hasn't really been used in any sort of high leverage. The results haven't been great. That pen might be a sort of no thanks if they trade Michael Kopech.
Yeah, I tend to think that's where I'm going with the White Sox in the second half. They're so bad. They're not creating that many opportunities. I think the Nats sort of jumped out as that third team I was looking at. I'm glad you called out Robert Garcia. I think he's the only lefty they've got in their pen right now. But guess what? Sean Doolittle is a big part of their coaching staff. Sean Doolittle is lefty that close. I don't think they care in the second half of the season.
Yeah, how much are they like, oh, what if we don't have a second lefty? How many games are we going to win? It's going to be more like, no, we just sold. We're building for next year. We can get a lefty in the offseason if we need one.
Right. Super deep watch list sort of name, though, that just came up in Washington. Amos Willingham. I want to see what he brings to the table with a little more time. He's got 1 inning. Just pitched, I think, in the last game before the break against the Brewers. But maybe there's your long-term
97-7.
Yeah, throws hard. So we'll see. They can find something there with Amos Willingham. Not an endorsement to pick him up. Just the name to put on the radar for the long term. Absolutely. We're going to go. If you want to check out Eno's updated rankings when they drop next week, you're going to want to get a subscription to do that. theathletic.com/rates and barrels will give you the best possible deal on that. You can find Eno on Twitter at Enosaurus. You can find me at Derek Van Riper on the pod at Rates and Barrels. That's going to do it for this episode of Rates and Barrels. We're back with you on Monday.
Thanks for listening.